We are now just mere days away from the federal election. I can almost taste that democracy sausage sizzle. And today we're talking about what voters have said is the biggest issue influencing their vote this election. No surprises, it is the cost of living. In fact, nearly 2/3 of young people listed cost of living as their main concern at this election when asked by TDA in a Resolve poll. So what are the parties proposing to do about it? We're breaking down exactly that in today's podcast.
Now, Billi, this is one of those policy areas that I don't necessarily feel like we need to explain the idea behind. I think anyone who has
a bank account?
Who has a bank account, who has to pay for anything, look at prices, we're all aware that for the last couple of years, and certainly as we are today, we are in a cost of living crisis. Prices have gone up. Everything is very expensive. And so all sides of politics have really come to this election to say, we are the right people to lead us through this crisis and to get us out the other end. I want to start, though, with the two major parties. And the interesting thing on this is that they actually agree on quite a bit when it comes to cost of living, which is rare, but it is happening.
Yeah, they do agree on quite a lot. And I think that's where we should start, is what do they agree on before we get to what they disagree on.
Yeah.
So these are policies that are going to happen no matter who wins government, because both of the major parties have agreed that they should happen. So as long as they keep their promises, then it will happen.
I mean, that is a big point. We can't gloss over that. They do need to fulfill their commitments. But hey, we'll put our belief in them for now.
Let's start with supermarket price gouging, which is the practice of supermarkets charging unreasonably high prices for products. I feel like over the past couple of years, we've heard a lot about this.
Because we've done 10 podcasts.
Yes, because Coles and Woolworths, the two biggest supermarkets in Australia, have both been accused of price gouging. Important to note that they have denied those accusations and said that it doesn't happen, but nevertheless, the accusations were still mounted against them. There was an investigation into these accusations by the consumer watchdog, which is called the ACCC, and they actually found no evidence of price gouging by either supermarket. They did find that Australia's supermarkets are amongst the most profitable in the world, which is quite interesting, but they said that that's not because of unreasonably high prices being put onto consumers. Nevertheless, the major parties have both promised to ban price gouging to make sure that it never happens.
Gotcha.
Another thing that they agree on is giving everyone $150 of energy bill relief until the end of this year. And so that will be automatically applied to our electricity bills that come every quarter usually, and so it will be $75 per bill. One more thing that they both agree on is they both want to triple the number of GP visits that are currently being bulk billed. I feel like that's a term that you hear a lot, but if you've never been bulk billed, then you might not know what it means. So it's basically when the patient has no out-of-pocket costs because their visit is covered by Medicare. Yep. Some people say it's free. It's not technically free because it is covered by
Nothing
Medicare.
in life is free.
Very good point. So at the moment, if a GP sees children under 16 or concession holders, then the government provides GPs with an extra payment, which is called an incentive payment. And you can kind of think of it as like this bonus that the government gives GPs for fully bulk billing their patients. Now, what Labor announced and the coalition agreed to match is to expand that incentive payment so that it can be accessed by GPs for all Australians. So like I said, at the moment, it's for those under 16 or concession holders. Under this policy that both major parties have agreed to, it will now be open for all Australians. So that should mean that everyone should see more of their visits to the GP being bulk billed. And like I said before, that means that you won't hopefully have any out-of-pocket cost when you go to your GP.
Super interesting to hear about those areas where Labor and the coalition actually agree. It goes to something you said earlier in the week about the fact that we do have these parties really near the centre of the political spectrum, so much so that they can agree on what potentially is good policy. However, we don't want to overstate this bipartisanship or both sides agreeing, because there is a lot that they disagree on. So now I want to move to what both parties are putting forward that's different when it comes to the cost of living crisis. Let's start with Labor. And I'm laughing because in our notes for this episode, you told me we were going to start with alphabetical order because I think you think that I'm not thinking. So anyway, we're going to start with Labor.
To be fair, Labor is alphabetically before the Liberal Party.
Excellent. Who we've referred to as the coalition this whole time.
But it's not before the coalition.
Okay, anyway. Great. So Labor.
Okay, so one of their key policies is a tax cut for every single taxpayer in Australia starting in July 2026, so July next year. Now, Labor has actually already legislated this policy. So they
rushed that through very quickly.
They did. And so the plan is to decrease the lowest tax threshold from 16 cents for every dollar to 15 cents from July next year. And then that would also drop again to 14 cents in 2027. If I've lost you, fair enough, because that was a whole lot of numbers. Basically, what you need to know is that from next year, anyone earning above $45,000 would receive a tax cut of $268. And then from 2027, that would increase to $536 per year. Following? How are your numbers going?
Yeah. Absolutely following. Probably helps that we have heard this on repeat in every debate and every time the Prime Minister gets up. That's not the only part of their cost of living commitment though, right?
Hello, Billi here from TDA. We have just looked at our YouTube analytics and 95% of you who are watching our videos aren't subscribing. If you want to help independent media like us grow, the best way you can do that is by pressing subscribe. Thank you so much and back to the video. No, so Zara, you know at the end of every financial year when you need to do your tax. You're familiar with that process?
I wasn't sure if that was going to be a hard question. Yes, I am across that.
And so,
I don't know if I do it well, but yes.
And so part of what that usually entails is telling the ATO any work-related expenses you may have accumulated over the year. And then the ATO, if they agree that those were work-related expenses, will then usually deduct that from your pre-tax income. And it means that you could be eligible for a tax return.
Yeah.
Now, Labor has announced that all Australian workers will be eligible for a tax deduction of $1,000 for work-related expenses. So that again will just reduce how much tax you pay. Now, my understanding of how this works is it basically applies to you if you are not claiming more than $1,000 of work-related expenses. So if usually you'd only claim under that, then what this means is you can just tick a box and you don't need to find all of the receipts that you usually would need to provide to the ATO to claim these deductions. So if you choose that option, that means that you'd be eligible for that tax deduction. You don't need, again, any evidence. However, if you are claiming more than $1,000 of work-related expenses, then you'd still need to go through the usual process, find all of your receipts and claim it to the ATO.
Very, very difficult task, I must say, from personal experience. All right, Billi, the last thing I just want to touch on with Labor is, and we've spoken about it many times on this podcast before, but Labor is proposing to cut HECS debts, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll go through this one quickly. So Labor plans to cut all student debts by 20%, which is estimated to wipe about $16 billion off loans. And for the average student loan, that will see about $5,520 cut from the student loan.
Okay, so that's what Labor is proposing to do. Can we shift gears now and talk about the Coalition's plan?
Yeah, so the Coalition has said that it would offer a one-off tax cut in the 2025-26 tax return, which for those playing along at home is the upcoming financial year. Now, under this plan, anyone earning up to $144,000 would be eligible for a tax cut. Now, to explain this properly, there are so many numbers, but basically, this would be a tax cut for anyone earning below $144,000, and anyone earning above that wouldn't be eligible for it.
And so a tax cut is one part of their policy platform. Mm-hmm. I feel like the one that I've heard Peter Dutton as leader speaking about the most, though, is the Coalition's plan to cut the fuel excise. We did touch on it a bit earlier this week. Can you really quickly, though, just rehash what is the Coalition's plan to cut the fuel excise?
I feel like every single day I wake up and I see a new photo of someone in the Coalition at a petrol station.
Yeah.
This is...
And all their signs are right outside petrol stations, and
yes,
it says the Coalition will cut your petrol.
This is one of their really big policies, and basically it means that for every single litre of petrol that you buy, it will be 25 cents cheaper under the Coalition's plan.
I want to move now to something that kind of overlaps with health a bit, but is still about the cost of living, and that's the cost of seeking help, of mental health care specifically. The Coalition has announced that it will increase the number of subsidised mental health sessions from 10 to 20. It was 20 during COVID, but then got cut back down to 10. What's their policy here?
Yeah, so if you don't know, anyone who has a mental health plan, which you can get from a GP, can access up to 10 subsidised mental health sessions a year. So that means that you can see a psychologist for a cheaper price for up to 10 sessions because Medicare will cover most of the fee. Like you just said, Zara, during the pandemic, when the Coalition was in government, they increased the number of subsidised sessions you can access per year from 10 up to 20 per year. Then when Labor got into government, it went back down to 10. Now the Coalition is saying that if they get into government again, they would increase it back up to 20.
And Labor wouldn't.
They've
ruled that out, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what it means is that if Coalition gets into government, you'd be able to access 20 sessions with a psychologist per year at a much cheaper rate.
All right, so we've got a very wide array of policies here, from fuel to mental health to tax cuts, kind of got everything really under the sun. Supermarkets, exactly. So that's what the major parties are kind of bringing to the table. Really, really quickly though, what about the Greens, the biggest minor party in our parliament?
Yeah, I'll go through 3 of their policies that relate to cost of living. The first thing they want to do is introduce universal dental into Medicare. They also want to wipe all student debts, cancelling the current HELP and HEX loans being paid off by graduates. And on top of that, they want to make university and TAFE free for everyone. So there would be no fee for you to go to university.
Which used to be the case.
The last one that the Greens spoke about is that they also want to introduce 50-cent public transport around Australia. So that would be a flat rate for you to travel on public transport.
Yeah, interesting. That's something we've seen at a state level.
In Queensland.
Yeah. So certainly haven't heard it at a federal level, but an interesting one to keep an eye on. Well, Billi, thank you so much for taking us through all the proposals to make life a little bit cheaper for all Aussies. Depending on what happens on May 3rd, we might have our fuel cut, or we might all get a tax cut. We don't know. Wait and find out. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Politics 101. We'll be back tomorrow with another explainer of how our political system works. But until then, have a great day.